Well, here's the thing, and I talked about this on my show previously, is that you have to understand that the powers that be, these priest class types that have been masters over the past several centuries, if not even longer, of staging revolutions, of steering certain elements of a society to revolt. They have done this time and time again. You take a look at the American Revolution, you take a look at the French Revolution, you take a look at the Bolshevik Revolution, you take a look at all these CIA funded coups that have occurred over the world in the 20th century, and you see a pattern. These people are able to steer revolutions very effectively. So wouldn't it be naive of us to think that, okay, this Tea Party patriot thing is the exception, that somehow this is a legitimate resistance to the new world order? And I can tell you, just based upon the research that you've done, Josh, and the research that I've done, that clearly that these organizations like the John Birch Society, the Council for National Policy, and many others are obviously there to steer any sort of discontent to the world order. They're there to either steer this discontent into the ground so nothing effective ever happens against the new world order, or they're going to take these people who are discontented and get them to revolt as part of a staged civil war scenario. And I know you've talked about that constantly on your show, and I think you're 100% correct. All right, do you see anything like this happening in the short term, or do you think it's going to be more of the same for a little while?
You know what? I got to be honest with you. I've seen this for the past few years, and I think it's. I think we're very, very likely to see this type of scenario come to a head in the coming year, in 2011. I think that we're going to start to see the beginning stages of civil unrest. I think we're going to start to see violent, provocateur situations happen against police and law enforcement and things of that nature, and people who are gun owners and people who are sort of trying to cling on to this old idea of what America once was, that is not anything more than another construct and another phony paradigm that's been implanted and programmed into us. I mean, you've obviously seen the I was talking about this with some friends last night. You obviously probably seen the pictures, I think it's from the late 30s, taken into some schools in America where, the original Pledge of Allegiance was, the Nazi
Hitler
salute. Yeah, Heil Hitler's, I mean.
It's true, there's pictures of it.
There's pictures of it, and that literally was where that all started. And so a lot of the people that are still hanging on to that idea of what they were programmed to believe America was supposed to be about, and that's really what most people who are in the Tea Party movement or the Patriot movement or any of that stuff, that's really what they're doing. They, it's not that these people are, wrong in what they're doing or anything for the most of the time. They just don't know any better. They're following a paradigm and a belief system that's been programmed into them from a very young age and reinforced constantly throughout their lives, from everything from the media to TV to sports to just everything constantly reinforces that idea of America, the great country that you pledge allegiance to. And so a lot of these people that are going down that road that are inadvertently going to find themselves in the midst of a new civil war in this country, I think a lot of them have the best intentions at heart, but most people do. And this is generally one of the key elements of the control system, is to pit two peoples against each other and convince them that they're enemies. It's always a convincing process. This person here, this person that. But in the meantime, the people who actually fund these wars and pay for these weapons and pay the congressmen and the senators off to get them to vote for these wars, and unless you're in the Bush administration, and then you can just declare war without even having to vote on it. But regardless of that, they pay everybody off, and then the people that are fighting and dying for this oftentimes are following belief systems that have been programmed into them. You've got, these Al-Qaeda militants that are these guys that are just young and they're poor and they're living in the dirt in the desert, and they want to have some kind of life for themselves. So they meet up and somebody tells them, hey, we'll give you lots of money if you help us try and go kill these dirty Americans who want to kill you because you're a Muslim. And then we do the same thing to our people. Hey, let's go kill some Hajis. Here you go. Here's a bunch of money. We'll get you in a college program. We'll get you a lot of money, and you just go over here and kill some folks for us. And, the people who are doing the fighting rarely know where these ideologies are being supplanted into them. And so the same thing that has happened on a microcosmic level different sides of different wars being programmed into belief while the other guy is the enemy is now happening. Now the truth movement and the patriot movement is programming their constituency about who the enemy that they have to go fight against now is. But see, it becomes this shadowy thing like we talked about with Al-Qaeda and the space Al-Qaeda. It's this shadowy enemy, this New World Order thing, you know, where very rarely are the people who are really in charge of this ever really defined. So that no matter what happens, if there is a staged provocateur revolution or a new civil war, the real enemies that have been identified by true researchers are not going to be the people who get up in arms to go fight are going to be going after. They're going to be going after low-level minions and really probably just killing their brothers and sisters and cousins and everything else. I mean, it's sick and sadistic, and in the end, it's all about death. People say, well, why would they do this? Why would they go to such extreme lengths? Because that's how they operate, and because they have to get us to do this to ourselves. There's some sort of, you know, spiritual moral code, it seems, that you see sort of hinted at, and you see it through looking at the news and how these different things work together, where, you know, they have the technology. They have neutron bombs. They could come in. They could drop neutron bombs on every major city across the world right now, tomorrow, come in and, you know, sweep up the dust and then move in with you know, their newly created master race or something, but they haven't done that. Why haven't they done that? Because it seems that we have to be the ones that bring this down on ourselves. There's some sort of morality code within all this where we have to willfully enslave ourselves or kill each other and destruct each other. They cannot do it wholeheartedly, but they are trying to convince us, and they have convinced many of us, that our own servitude is great, and our own servitude is what you do to be a patriot. Your own servitude is what you do to be a loyal citizen of the world. It's sick.
Yeah, it's pretty disgusting. And of course, we see this every Sunday when you see all these people at these National Football League games and going crazy. And they literally think that they're free because they can go to a football game and drink a bunch of beer and act crazy. And, you know, I don't have any problem with going to see a sporting event or watching TV or whatever. But when you see the state of the world, one would think that what's happening all around the world and the state of things would be far more important than some breads and circus spectacle or any of these other things that really have no significance at all. But, you know, I think you brought up some really good points there, because really, if you do have any sort of war scenario, the people who engineer these wars and the people who are the true enemies, they don't ever get caught up in the conflict. You don't see them actually involved in fighting. It's always the low-level people, like you mentioned, fighting each other. And it's all the result of these ideologies that have been programmed into people from a very young age about patriotism, about their nationality, and why they should believe in their country, and all this stuff. And really, when you start looking into these things a lot deeper, all of that stuff, it's really just a bunch of garbage to get us fighting amongst each other for really no reasons other than the reasons that the elite want to further their agenda of total enslavement. So that's clearly what we're seeing here. But I tell you what, the one thing you mentioned about civil unrest is very interesting, because it seems like in the year 2011, I guess we'll move on to what we think is going to happen in 2011. But the one thing that I see happening is that we see this fiscal crisis starting to really affect the states, and it's going to really start affecting the local government systems in this country, kind of like what you're seeing over in Europe. So I think, considering what we've seen over in Europe, and we see how there's a lot of civil unrest going on over there with protests, riots, people's pensions getting stolen from them, it seems like that type of thing is about to happen over here, at least in 2011 or 2012. And what do you think about all that?
Well, I think it's definitely on the agenda, as you mentioned, with these more and more banks that have been bailed out now, looking as if they're going to fail. We're starting to see the second round of the financial crisis come around in 2011, which is going to be coincided again with all of these various, just these societal divisional things. I mean, divisions over race, divisions over sexual orientation, on and on and on. They run these continual divide and conquer situations. And I think that's why we've seen, little scandals here, little scandals there, that they invest, a week or two of the news cycle to, and then move on to something else. I think that's why we've seen a buildup of these over the past several years, is because of whatever this new financial collapse and this, as you mentioned, states now becoming essentially bankrupt. I mean, they're doing exactly to the infrastructure of the United States they're doing it on a macrocosmic level, what they did on a microcosmic level to the Twin Towers, or you would do in any building demolition, where you crack the foundation down first, and then bit by bit, then you blow out the rest of it, and it comes down, falling on itself in a perfect implosion. That's what they're doing to the United States. They're whittling us away a little by little here, and then once you get individual states to collapse, and then have to become a wholly owned subsidiary of whatever bank or whatever Federal Reserve corporation takes over this country, you're going to start to see more and more loss of freedoms and more willingness to essentially give the people to give themselves over to whatever kind of power, because they just will want to have their simple lives back. People will just want the ability to be able to go shop at the Gap and go to the mall and go to a movie on Friday night and go to the Olive Garden. So, I mean, literally, that's how we're going to get, I think, put into further and continued enslavement, is through the idea of taking away what people have built around themselves, that their comfortable, cozy little lives here in the United States of America, and then offering up the solution to get that back, which who knows what it will be, either some foreign entity owning us outright, or us becoming a part of another, joining with the EU, as many people have speculated. I don't really know exactly what's going to happen. There's a lot of possibilities, but what I'm saying is it does seem to me that there is a situation that's going to occur after a lot of violence and a lot of unrest, where they're going to basically try and sell us on something. They're going to try and sell us on the idea of, if you want the old America back, this is what we have to do. It's not going to be something that all Americans are going to be into or like the idea of merging with the European Union. But in order to get everybody's financial stability back to where it was, and to have your nice, lovely America back, well, this is what it's going to take. And most people will go running into that, kicking and screaming, begging for it to take place, because people just want things to be normal, or what they consider to be normal, which is mainstream society. Just everybody putting their head down, going forward, and not asking questions. And I think that we're going to be blackmailed into our servitude by that being offered to people.
Well, it's interesting because you take a look at how all these currencies, how they're manipulating these currencies. So in some respects, some of these currencies are getting to the point, like the Canadian dollar and the US dollar, where they're almost trading at parity. And I'm wondering if they're trying to get all these currencies to the point where they're trading in a range in which there's almost a one-for-one exchange for all these currencies, and then they can bring in, at least more easily, their one world currency system through the special drawing rights system. And that's, of course, something they've been floating out there and testing the waters with in the media. Nicolas Sarkozy was talking about it, of course, the leader of France, and a bunch of other leaders and powerful individuals within the banking system have float out this idea. But also another interesting part about this whole thing is gold and silver. They floated the whole notion that gold would be part of a special drawing rights package. So I guess my question is that with gold and silver, and we know how it's all manipulated, if they're going to crash all these currencies to the point where they're not worth anything, and then they'll say, oh, geez, well, you know what? We have this special drawing rights system, and we're going to have gold be a part of it. And then you see people like Ron Paul and these are gold bugs out there that are always talking about the brilliance of the gold standard, which we know is a phony solution. So, Josh, what's your take on that? I mean, do you think that could be a possibility in the future in which they could use gold as a way to sell the people on this notion of a global currency?
Well, I think the biggest thing is they're gonna offer, as you mentioned there, they're going to offer a variety of things. This is the same thing that a lot of the EU states and the SEO states have talked about for several years. This quote unquote basket of currencies is what they've referred to it as. And so you have various amounts in different kinds of currencies as it stands right now that have varying degrees of value. It's kind of like how OPEC works. You have OPEC member states, and the OPEC oil can only be traded in dollars, and that cuts out big resource consumers like China and Russia out of the picture. So ultimately, as it all has been about for the past since time immemorial, it continues to be about resources. And I think that how they're going to move around the currencies is going to very much be a part of the resources and how the resources are traded in. They want to create an equilibrium where, and that's what this current crash of, as you mentioned before, these different type of currencies from Canada all over the place, they're creating this new equilibrium where everybody in the world has one monetary system where resources are traded in, and essentially you have an equilibrium across the board where you might have, you might have people working in America, which are like we do right now, to mine resources, natural gas, oil, and others that ultimately end up going to China. Now, most people don't even know that work within these industries that's indeed where that is going. But most of what is pulled out of the ground here in the United States does not go to the United States for consumption.